All right then. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Graham,
I'm Amanda Laucher.
and we're co-founders of an organization called Mind Minds, and we're going to be telling you about our experiments over the last couple of years to defy Bloomberg, to transform the economies of some communities by transitioning from an economy driven by coal to one driven by code.
Yes, so here's a map of Appalachia. You probably recognize this. And what the colors are indicating is the level of decrease in coal mining positions. So in this region, between 32 and 94% of coal mining jobs have been lost. These are small towns that are completely driven by coal mining. So if you can imagine 94% of the employable population being laid off, it gets worse. For every one coal mining job that is lost, there are 5 other jobs that are affected, whether it be in the supply chain or even things like in Logan, West Virginia, the Walmart shut down. Has anybody ever even heard of a Walmart shutting down? They just print money, I think. But in these coal mining towns where Walmart is often the only source of groceries and buying the goods that you need, Walmart's not even making enough money to stay open.
So there are some of the counties here where the population has changed so dramatically over the last decade or so, from many tens of thousands down to 10,000 or so. It's really quite incredible seeing the change over those communities.
So I think there's been coal mining in the news quite a lot lately with the election and with things like Hillary Clinton saying she's going to put all coal mines out of work, and Donald Trump coming in and saying, no, I'm going to make it better. I'll bring the jobs back. Believe it or not, that this is not really a political topic. The politicians grab hold of it because they can identify with people in that way. But the declining coal has very little to do with regulation and politics, as we may already know. There have been regulations put into place so that we could help to make the planet green and help the planet to survive for the future. However, that is not necessarily the driver of the declining coal. Coal mining is really expensive in the States because of things like we want to keep our coal miners alive when they're underground and working hard. We have certain kinds of safety regulations in place that don't exist in places like China or India, where coal mining can be done quite cheaply. So even as we start to say, let's loosen some of the regulations around the EPA and coal mines, that doesn't necessarily mean that coal mining jobs will come back to the U.S.
So at the same time, we've got these regions that are really struggling with their economies because of the change in the prevailing industry. We have another industry, the tech industry, that's struggling because they can't fill all the positions. So you see all sorts of numbers. This chart on the left was from TechHire and Obama project for increasing diversity in the tech industry, and they showed that there were over 500,000 unfilled jobs in the tech industry. And there's other ones, so a report by Richard Burke showing that by 2020 there'll be almost 1.5 million unfilled jobs just within software development. So we see these two extremes, areas that are struggling because there's no career opportunities, and sectors which can't get enough people to fill the demand.
To make matters even worse, Donald Trump has signed an executive order to call into question and call into review the way we hand out H-1B visas. And the problem that we can't hire American workers to write the software that we need to use here, often we will offset that problem by bringing people in from overseas who have the education, who have the ability to do these jobs. Well, Donald Trump doesn't necessarily think that it's a good idea to be importing these skills, so he wants to put a hold on these H-1B visas, so it's going to be even harder to hire technologists. So if you're in a position where you're currently hiring, you're probably already familiar with this, but over the next couple of years, it can become a real hassle to try and find somebody that we can afford to pay to write software.
And then there's boy bands, right? So there's the issue, Silicon Valley, lots of 20-something-year-olds writing apps for 20-something-year-olds, all going through the same sort of education system. And that kind of sucks. What's great is diversity, that diversity of thought, of backgrounds, in every way, bringing together those different experiences so that as development teams, we're building things that matter to everyone.
A lot of you may have already heard about things in Silicon Valley. It's very popular to build tools that are really good for 22-year-old guys or 27-year-old guys to determine how much cereal they have left in their cereal box at home, because that is a life-saving issue. Where there aren't a lot of people writing apps and writing tools for things like elderly care or some real-world problems that we really could put our technology to work trying to solve. So we're not the first to realize that this is a problem, obviously. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg made the comment, well, hey, send them to California, teach them to code, and they'll always have jobs here in California. We can't hire technologists, so teach the coal miners to write software. At which point, Michael Bloomberg came in and said, oh, you can't just teach a coal miner to write code. Which I think he was trying to do the right thing by saying, coding is not now, nor will it ever be a blue-collar job. He was basically indicating that software developers are so smart that you can't hire just anybody to do that work, which we completely agree with. But what he didn't realize is that coal miners actually have really hard jobs. Coal mining is an industry that's extremely competitive and hard to enter. So if you live in some of these small towns in Appalachia, you may be the valedictorian of your high school. You may be the best candidate to go on to university and get some PhD and work towards curing cancer. However, you can get a six-figure salary right out of the gate working in a coal mine because you have the skills and you're very trainable so that you can have the skills to do the very technical work that is coal mining.
And coal mining isn't about a pick and shovel. Actually, we've got some friends down in Kentucky. They were a bunch of coal miners who got together and decided to learn how to write code and start a consultancy. And they had the opportunity to take an astronaut down in one of the underground mines and show them around, give them a tour. And the astronaut's comment was, hey, this technology looks really familiar. This is the kind of things that we use on a day-to-day. It's not just manual labor. It's about, really sophisticated technology and driving that technology.
Has anybody been into a coal mine before? No. Oh, yeah, there is somebody. Awesome. They're very common in museums where you see kind of the old tech that was being used as opposed to some of the new heavy equipment machinery that they use nowadays. So these are big problems. Like, we're talking about two really huge problems. And Jonathan and I came at it from this very strange angle of neither of us had ever been in a coal mine. We had just moved back from London, living in Chicago, and we're hearing about these huge problems. And so, of course, we said, we've got to be agile. We can't really operate at that level. Let's start really tiny.
So the tiny place we started was actually Amanda's younger brother. He was a coal miner at the time, a couple of years ago, and was really worried about his future, his position. A whole load of his friends had been laid off, mines were closing, and he knew that if he got laid off, he'd have 6 months in order to get retrained, re-employed, and move on. And he was really worried how he'd be able to support his family and stay within the community where he was settled.
Yeah, so he's got a wife and 3 kids at home. His wife didn't work. She was raising the children, and he kind of had no idea what he was going to do. And I would always see on Facebook or on the news that this is a big problem, right? Like, coal miners are being laid off. We're moving towards green energy. But it felt so distant. It felt like such a faraway problem. Meanwhile, my little brother has been a coal miner since, the past 7 years or something like that. And he, at 4th of July picnic at my parents' house, he says, yeah, I think I'm going to lose my job. There's a mandatory meeting that I've got to go to on Monday, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose my job. So I'm like, well, what do you mean? Why would they why would they fire you? He's got a lot of things going for him. He's also an EMT, so he's very valuable in the mine if there's a problem. And he says, Amanda, they're not firing 1 or 2 or 3 people. They're closing down. They've claimed bankruptcy. They're closing. So, of course, that was very scary to us, and we started to think about what could we do to help Marvin.
So just to focus in on where we started, so focus in from that whole Appalachia region, I've become to know the area a lot more than I did 2 years ago. But this is Pennsylvania, this is Greene County, and we were somewhere down here, down right in the southwest of Pennsylvania.
Did you know where Pennsylvania was 2 years ago?
I'd kind of been there. It was a plane ride away, yeah. It turns out it's an 8-hour drive from Chicago away, so that's how I became to know it. And there was lots of mines in the region closing.
Waynesburg has population 4,000 people, and
that's the city in the area, the big city of Waynesburg.
It's the biggest city in Greene County, and in one go, 1,200 people were laid off. I mean, there's no way to even think about it without tears in your eyes. It was a huge devastation. So the picture on the top corner is the coal miners underground doing their jobs, and the picture on the bottom is the coal miners and the entire community marching against the idea that the coal mines were just allowed to claim bankruptcy, fire everybody, and take their pensions away as well at the same time.
So, what was our problem? The Epic, the Marv, Amanda's younger brother, he was an at-risk coal miner. This can go for any coal miner, former coal miner. He wanted to transition to a new career so that he was able to support his family.
Yep, so we said that's a big problem. Let's break it down into smaller problems that we can actually solve. Here's our first epic. And we said, okay, cool. There are things that he can do, right? Like there are other jobs in the area. There's McDonald's.
There's 2 McDonald's in Waynesburg. You can work there. It doesn't compensate as well as the coal mines did.
And the only thing that actually did compensate even anywhere close to where coal mines do is long-haul truck driving. And I thought about my little brother with his 3 very young children and him on the road all the time. And it was one of those things like, oh gosh, no, don't do that. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel like the right thing.
So of course, us living in Chicago, software developers, had a 4th of July barbecue when Marvin was telling us what was going on. It's like, hey, just write code. There's loads of jobs, it's good money, it's a no-brainer, right?
And I'm like, well, we're blood, so obviously we think similarly, we have a lot in common. And I'm like, Marv, you could totally do this. He says, yeah, let me do that. Hey, by the way, can I borrow enough money to take off for the next 4 years and go to university and get a degree? I'm like, ooh, maybe not. I said, well, just move to Chicago. There's Dev Boot Camp here. There's all kinds of boot camps. Just go to one of those. And then we started talking, and it's like, wow, those are $15,000 to $25,000 for a participant to go through a boot camp. And they expect that you already know some stuff, right?
And you have to move to the city.
Which is extremely expensive when the cost of living is, very low in rural Pennsylvania. So we did this. We said, let's drive 8 hours every weekend and teach some coal miners how to write software. We set up a 501c3 so that we could use that as a vehicle for doing that.
So what was success to us? We wanted to be able to bring people through, and for any graduates from the training to not have any debt from it. We didn't want to charge $15,000, $20,000 and put people in debt as they were losing their jobs and going through economic stress anyway. And we wanted them to go through and be able to gain employment within the tech industry.
And we really wanted them to have a sustainable career, something that we know writing software is not going anywhere. That's why most of us do it. Well, at least one of the reasons why most of us do it. It's really exciting, and it's something that we can do from anywhere, anytime we want. We're always going to be able to find a job. So we came up with our first hypothesis is, we could teach Marv how to write software, or we could just tell him, hey, online dev boot camp is free. Just go do that. But we hypothesized that it's actually easier to learn something that is very complex when you're doing it with other people, especially if you get a bunch of people who know nothing about it, and you just say, hey, go. Working as a group, we thought would help them to do that.
So as a new training program, I would like to recruit several people, not just one, who are willing to take that risk on some unknown people coming into the area, talking about things that career opportunities that they're not heard of before, and have those people have some potential for success.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. I didn't know you could write code and make money when I was in high school. I went off to college and thought, okay, cool, I'm going to do something with computers because I like computers. Nobody that I knew was a software developer. Nobody in the area was a software developer, which is good and bad, right? Because nobody has any preconceived notions that they can't do it, which was quite a good thing. But we needed to figure out, do people have the aptitude to do it as well? Not just anybody can write software, as we'd already talked about. So to recruit, we decided we're just going to post a message on Facebook. It started with my personal Facebook account, and I said, hey, if we did this, would anybody be interested? And it kind of drove some questions, which was good. And then the local newspaper got a hold of it and said, hey, I'll post something for you. If you're trying to get people who want to learn a new skill, you're doing a good thing. I'll post something for free.
And we talked about that importance of having a diverse group, having different backgrounds, ways of thinking. So we didn't limit it to just coal miners joining. We had coal miners' spouses, other people who were being impacted by the loss of jobs in the area. So we had a mix of people coming in, and really people that you would never imagine working together before. There were people in the room who would just not have mixed, and they came together, on this experiment with us.
Yes, so we had all of our cohorts so far, I think we're right around 50% female. When a coal miner's wife hears that he may lose his job and he's saying, no, don't worry about it, everything's fine, we're good. And she's like, wait a minute, hang on, I'd like to be able to help support my family if something's going on. Let me step in and take a class just in case. So we have a really high percentage of wives or stay-at-home moms who had never had jobs before, which is really quite cool.
So going into an area where there aren't a lot of software developers, where when you say, code, people don't really understand what you're doing, we had to find a way to demonstrate and find whether people had the aptitude for a new career within tech. And this is one of the examples we used. We talked about laundry. And sounds kind of weird, but we said if you can do the laundry and you can explain that and break down the problem, then, you could end up being a good software developer.
This all sounded crazy to me. I'm like, wait a minute. I know a lot of people can do laundry, probably can't write software. And as we started talking more, it's more about not just being able to do the laundry, but being able to articulate what it is you're doing, what thoughts you're having as you're doing the laundry. Things like, oh, I have a stain on my white shirt. I probably, A, want to use some stain cleaner, and B, don't want to wash it with a red shirt, right? Like there's all these decisions that you make as you're doing it. There's iteration, there's conditionals, all the same sorts of things that you use when you're writing software, you use when you're doing laundry. And Jonathan was able to put this together in a way that he helped to write a program called Sonic Pi, which is an audible programming tool, which they use to write music, which is actually how I met John. He was writing music with code. So he's like, if I can write music with code, we can do laundry with code. And he did it in an audible fashion, which really helps people who had never seen code before say, hey, yeah, this is a step I could take. This is a weird leap. I get it, but I think I could do it.
So Sonic Pi was used in schools to introduce programming concepts. So why not to anyone else? So just simple things like you can make different sounds. You can create loops so that you're not keep on repeating them. So a sound for wearing clothes, for washing, for drying. Have the loops for that, and then start refactoring out, pull them out into functions with names so you can understand them, pass variables in, talk about recursion. You can do all of that really quite quickly, keeping within a context that makes sense when you've never done any code before.
So the next thing that we had to figure out was if we're going to have a bunch of people learning to write software together, we need to have them actually sitting together. The ability to pair and mob program, having a space was going to be really important. Unfortunately, we're bootstrapping this, right? We didn't have any kind of income from this. We weren't charging anybody anything. So we said, let's find a really inexpensive place to host this. And pretty quickly, the volunteer fire department stepped up and said, hey, you're doing something good for the community. Our space is for the community. Use our space and teach class here.
So we used this space for most of our first cohort. It was great. They let us use it. the Wi-Fi sucked. We just had to do hotspot from our phone. The space we couldn't always use if they had other things on, so we had to find other places. And people couldn't be there 24/7. It was only at prearranged times. So yes, this test of just using some community space, it was successful. We got through it, but it wasn't easy. We couldn't have people there 24 hours a day.
So eventually, after we finished our first cohort, we did decide that we would buy some space. And we've set up several offices since then, which work a whole lot better than using the volunteer space.
So now people can be there coding 24/7, which is great.
Chained to their desks. And then the next thing that we hypothesized about was, what on earth are we going to train these people? Like, we want them to write code and we want them to be able to get jobs. Meanwhile, I'm a statically typed functional programmer. I'm obsessed with ML, obsessed with statically typed functional languages. But you can't really get a job if you know nothing, if you have no experience doing Haskell or ML or even F#, which is much more approachable. So we said, let's teach them the fundamentals of writing software. The rest is going to change anyway.
So we were adamant we were going to help people become software developers and not help them to become, for example, a Rails developer. We wanted people to have careers where they could adapt and continue and really understand what was going on and not be in a position where they could go on and get a job, but then not necessarily easily adapt and move on.
Okay, so our story is that we want, as a trainee, we want to teach sustainable goals so that they can get a career that's valuable 5 years from now. So we did a lot for that. We did project-based learning. We said, okay, we could stand in front of a class and teach, but are they getting it? Who knows? Are they able to retain? Are they able to, think on their own and do this stuff? Would we really be able to tell? That's how I learned in university. Somebody stood and taught, and then I had some labs. But we said, we're going to completely change it around. We're going to do project-based learning in a reverse classroom.
Because, day-to-day work as a software developer, you're learning, you've got to figure things out, so you may as well start that from day one. So a series of projects, just little ones to start off with, bringing in one new concept after the other, building up on them, and then moving on to more complex things. So by the end of the training, they can get together, and we have community projects where they're pulling together their learning and creating something for a local nonprofit, for example, whether it's a web app, mobile app, something that they need to run their business.
Yep, so we started with FizzBuzz. Hopefully everybody's heard of FizzBuzz. We started with the katas. We said FizzBuzz teaches conditionals and a little bit of syntax. And then we added a bit more on top of that and added arrays. And then we got into more complex katas. And by the end, they're able to do, they're writing tic-tac-toe with an unbeatable AI.
And what's nice about having people all together doing project work from day one is you can seamlessly bring in different types of agile methodology. We have people pairing throughout. They swap who they're working with. We do a lot of mob programming. We have, even on those initial early exercises and projects, we just build them up slowly. We have that iterative development where they do a certain amount and get the client feedback and continue. So all of these things become commonplace as they're going through the training. As we have their community projects, they're working with clients again. We tend to use in those stages a Kanban style for moving forward on the projects, but we're able to talk about all of this so they're ready for the real world.
We essentially teach people to hate Jonathan. He's the evil client that comes back with these new requirements. So much so that recently one of our graduates wrote an Alexa skill for the Amazon Echo Alexa, where you say, Jonathan says, and it'll come up back with something like Google it yourself, or adding new requirements and that sort of thing. So teaching people to hate Jonathan is our agile process.
You can take that one if you like. And of course, working on projects all together, it's all about teamwork. There's no such thing as cheating. Everyone is using GitHub from day one. The code's there. They're taught to go and use other people's code, to understand it, to move forward with it. And that as a group, they either succeed or fail. If people miss sessions, they're expected to figure it out between themselves how to bring everyone up to speed. The community projects, they're always together. They have to deliver. Their graduation depends on delivering together and not individual performance.
Yep, and so a lot of people advised us against teaching GitHub right out of the gate, day one. I didn't learn with GitHub. Obviously, I'm older than that, but people say it's hard, right? Like, it's hard to pick up GitHub. But so many things that we as developers, as regular developers, think, oh, that's hard. It's hard because of when in the process we learned it. If you learn something from day one, it's actually really quite straightforward. I think that's one of the things that surprised me the most, is that some of the tools that we were using, people just kind of got. It wasn't the issue that we thought it would be. So we teach from a pretty flexible stack. We wanted to have a stack that would allow us to teach OO and FP. Remember my bias? We tried to refrain from our biases as much as possible just to teach kind of the fundamentals. We teach Ruby without Rails. We teach Sinatra. We start there when we start to get into the web. And then we give them bits and pieces that lead up to them knowing what's going on behind the magic of something like Rails, or a framework that hides a lot from you. We teach AWS because it's so employable. Most of our clients are working in the cloud, and a lot of them are moving towards serverless. So serverless is kind of like a buzzword right now, where people are saying, hey, what is this? Is it something I need? You have to be really smart to do that. But remember how I said if you learn it really early on, it's not hard? That's exactly where we are. These guys are now getting certified in AWS because that's just something that they've done from the beginning.
So one of the things that that a lot of people struggle with is the fact of failure, that things don't work, that we're not going to just tell them how things go on. They have to learn from things failing. And actually, one of the great things we found by introducing TDD early on is that they have to fail. They have to show the failing test before they move on to a successful one. And so they're getting those thousands of failures every day, and it becomes commonplace. And some people, it takes a few weeks to break them on. You don't have to be, your code doesn't have to work before you're showing it to other people, before you're happy to share it. But they all get there, and I think it's a really valuable lesson to learn early on, that failure is all part of the way of going through to success.
It's the hardest thing. These are people who have been really successful at pretty much everything their entire life, right? Like, get straight A's in high school, they graduate, they get a job right away, they're doing really well, they get promoted, getting raises, and now all of a sudden they're failing. And we're telling them that it's okay, but it's never in their life been okay. If you think about going through high school, it's not okay to fail. It's not okay to cheat. There's so many things that you have to break yourself of for the way that you were used to learning. And it is 100% of the cohorts that we've had, it's always the reason somebody quits, because they can't deal with failure. And normally we try to talk them out of that. I'm on the edge, I'm gonna drop out.
So what does it mean to be able to demonstrate that you've got the skills at the end, that you are employable? And so we hypothesized that it doesn't really matter where you've learned it, as long as you can demonstrate you've got a portfolio of code and you've got the ability to talk about it and show that you understand it, then that should be enough to get an entryway into a career as a software developer.
Yeah, so we decided what a portfolio should look like. Who would we want to hire? I was in a hiring position in Chicago, and it was really hard to find people who had the skills that I needed. So it was easy for me to say, what skills do I want these people to have that they can come out with that I would want to hire? And the whole thought was, if they've got this portfolio and I would want to hire them, then so would everybody else. So as a trainee, I would like to show potential employers what I've learned so that they'll consider hiring me.
And so they all end up with a GitHub portfolio of, depending on the cohort, what we end up covering, 15, 20 repos, projects that they've built during the time, which includes a community project for the last 3 or 4 weeks where they've built some real life software that's out in production generally for a non-profit in the area.
Yeah, so remember the stack we showed you earlier? We completely throw that out the window when we start to talk to potential clients for community projects. People write Java, C#, Swift, It's really dependent on what the client needs. This really goes to test that when we said that they're software developers and they're not, Ruby or JavaScript or any one type of developer, this proves to them. But let me tell you, the look on somebody's face when they've been doing Ruby and JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SQL, and you say, okay, you're writing an iPhone app. They look so shocked, like, please don't do this to me. There's no way I can do this. And then it really helps them to get past that for themselves to say, oh, actually, I had all the tools in my tool bag that I needed. I just need to pick up this new language.
So for bootcamp graduates, what does the future look like? What happens when you go through that initial training? You've got the skills, you've got a portfolio of code, you can talk about it. What is the future? So for many people, particularly if you're in one of the major cities, there are plenty of employers who are used to taking on people as bootcamp graduates and bringing them in as junior developers and having a supportive program to train them up. So, lots of companies that do this, that support that process, that recognize the benefits that bringing people on from different backgrounds brings to them.
Yeah, so in a city where you've got all these companies with these support structures for bootcamp grads, you're in a great situation. But let me tell you, anybody who says that after a 16-week bootcamp, this person's ready to work remotely or work on their own or whatever the case, definitely not the case. Like, people need support. This is the start of their tech career. It's not the, okay, you're ready, go.
So the employer landscape where we were training looked a bit more like this.
And this is a shot from Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Yeah. So there aren't big companies. There's definitely not the support structure. Everybody who has a career in software development definitely has a degree or something backing them that maybe they came from the Silicon Valley or something like that. But there aren't boot camps. Nobody had heard of this before. It's not like there were other boot camps in the area that they could refer to. There's this group called Mind Minds. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. They taught me how to write software. Like, okay, kid, go home. There's no way you're getting a job.
So it would be really easy to say, well, hey, just move to San Francisco, move to Chicago, New York. You'll get a job. You'll build up your experience.
And they could, because there are companies that'd be really happy to take them on.
So this is just one reason why people didn't want to, as well as being settled with family, schools, other things going on, is, of course, cost of living. So from some comparison sites, the equivalent of a $150,000 salary in San Francisco, where we were in Waynesburg or where we've got an office in Clendenin, is less than $50,000.
That's pretty amazing to think about. The cost of living is 1/3, right? So what's the quality of your life when you move to someplace that's 3 times as expensive? Are you even able to survive? So we have another epic. Given a community has a group of skilled software developers, it can attract work to employ them. Yeah, you can say it, and it seems logical. It seems like it makes some sense, especially when we talk about that cost of living number. Companies should be flocking to the area, right? Well, nobody's going to be willing to take that risk. It's really sort of a silly risk to take to know, yeah, there's 10 boot camp grads. Let's open up shop. That's a great idea. So that's what we did.
So about halfway through the first training, we were seeing people were wanting to change careers. They had the aptitude for it, and they didn't want to leave the area. So I guess we got our next story as entrepreneurs. We wanted to be able to build a tech consultancy within a rural area, so in southwest Pennsylvania, so that we could give that real-world experience to our graduates, to the developers, so that they could then go on and build their careers.
And so we thought we would go about this a number of different ways. We were both consultants. We've worked for really big companies and startups and really high-profile, big-name companies. So we have a lot of contacts in the industry. So we thought, okay, well, using our contacts and using our consulting experience, hopefully we can put together something that will resemble employment for these folks. And so the first way that we went about doing that is testing the local market. Could we write software for the local high street companies? Up and down High Street, there's 50 companies. not in Waynesburg, maybe there's 20, but they needed software, right? They need websites, they need software to help them run their businesses. However, our first interaction was with a guy who owned several companies, and he said, yeah, right, I'd love to buy some software. I've actually went to companies a couple of different times, some of the big consultancies, some consultancies in Columbus, and they tell me immediately there's a $250,000 starting fee. Like, if you're going to build anything of any kind of significance, it's going to cost you a whole lot of money.
So we found, different solutions to work with these firms. So obviously building things up slowly, talking to them, training them up in agile methodology, not having this huge idea and it's like, yeah, we're going to build that before we get it into the market. So things that we're all really familiar with, but other people, businesses in the area hadn't been. So how do we get that, the minimum viable product out there, and we can start testing it and get something out there for 5,000, 10,000, not 250,000?
We did so much free consulting to teach people how to buy software and teach them what it does it mean to be agile and what's an MVP. We were lucky that we were still kind of viable ourselves. But they built a lot of really great products for local companies. And then the companies start to talk to each other, and then we get the reputation of being, hey, they're great, they've got great rates, they're not trying to rip us off. They've never tried to charge us for something that we didn't feel like we very much needed and added value to our company.
And some of the projects, they're fairly small, short-lived, and they're perfect for people who are just going through the training, and they get to see a lot of projects early on. They have local clients to work with, and they can build up their experience quickly.
Yeah, so the first of these is a local sign shop. Actually, my brother-in-law works for the company, and he says, hey, Amanda, let me introduce you. My boss needs some work. So it was kind of one of those cases where they felt sorry for us, I think, and said, you guys made a really stupid decision. Let me help you out. But we got to build a couple of really great websites for them, and the team did an amazing job, so she recommended us to a bunch of her friends. And then the second one is a company on High Street that makes T-shirts and was never able to sell online. So this company creates the T-shirts for all of the school sports. So there's 5 schools in the county. They have all of the contracts to, like your baseball hats and your jerseys and all that stuff they make and sell. So we gave them a forum to do that online. And then the third one is a not-for-profit that does work for a children's hospital in West Virginia. It's called the Grand Bash. They didn't really have any of the technology to help them run their Grand Bash. Has anybody heard of a gun bash or a Grand Bash? It's like this lottery thing where you essentially buy a number and then you spend a day at a big event hall drinking and you wait for them to call your number. It's the most fun thing. It sounds silly, but it's amazing.
And this is one where the main prize is like $100,000. It's big stuff, and they make in one event the order of $1 million or so for the local charities. And they were doing it all with paper and Excel and keeping track of things in ways that is kind of scary when you're talking about the business that they were running.
Yeah. And then the second thing that we thought we would test is displacing offshore contracts. You guys have all worked with offshore partners, and it can be really difficult to have the time zone barrier. Sometimes you have language barriers. There's all sorts of things that can get in the way with working with a remote project team. So we were local, and we had for the most part, the same culture as a lot of the companies that we work with in California, New York, Chicago. Some of the bigger cities now give us contracts that they used to send overseas. Not necessarily because they didn't like their partners overseas, but often cases because regulations are in place now over the past few years, especially with things like utilities, that don't allow offshore workers to see American data. So there's all kinds of these interesting intricacies in politics that help us to find work and to do a good job. So here are some quotes. I don't even know if they're readable from back here. From like the Financial Times did a report on us, and we did some work with Kiva, the microfunds company, and a financial marketing company out of New York as well. So we've had some really good feedback from both local and national companies.
So we recognize that in order to be successful in growing a tech hub, then it can't just be about one company, it's about an entire ecosystem. So for all this to work, for this to really be sustainable, we needed to work together and build that entire ecosystem so it was more than just us being one shop working in the area.
Yes, one company does not create a tech hub. We kind of started, at some point when we started getting some press, we said, how will we know if we're successful? Yes, we got that one person. We got my brother a job. He's working. If we go out of business, it's cool. He'll find another job. That's fine. He may have to move. How will we know if we've been successful? And we said, as soon as we have competition. When we have competition, we know that something went right and we've attracted businesses to hire software developers in the region. And so we started working with partners people who had moved from California to West Virginia, people who've had thought about starting their own companies before, people who had big companies and no local software development team that have now moved into the area, so that there actually is some competition. If somebody wants to leave us, they still have a career. We don't want anybody to be tied to us. So when we provide the free boot camp, we never ask anybody to work for us. It's not, hey, take this program, it's 16 weeks for free, and then you're chained to us for a year. We don't have anything in place like that. It's take the free training and run with it. Do something awesome. If that's with us, great. If it's not with us, that's cool too.
So one part of that building the ecosystem is having developers with different levels of experience. It's difficult if you've just got a sea of people who are coming through initial training, they're all junior. So in creating a tech hub, we need technologists of those varying levels of experience so that those beginners can grow and get established.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of more advanced people move into the area, but it's really hard to say, hey, I know you're loving your life in Columbus and you probably have your family and everybody here, but why don't you just move to southwestern Pennsylvania and kind of help us build a tech hub? We would like that, by the way. If anybody's interested, hit me up. However, we also knew that it would probably be more viable, more scalable if we would provide a mechanism for people in the industry with more experience to mentor our people who are coming out of the boot camp. So we created a mentor program that allows people to, who have the experience and the desire to help people who are in this situation become better. Now they log into our mentor app and they find somebody that has similar interests that they can coach up and help to get to the next level in their career.
I think the pterodactyl is rather
rather
curious on that page.
I love that guy.
So we'd got people coming through the training, getting the skills, able to then work with us on real life projects, building up their experience in the area where they were already living. So a third epic we had was around establishing academic credentials so that people can go on and really establish their careers. So as a bootcamp graduate, I'd like to have academic credentials so that I can really move on into different positions in my career.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't think that any boot camp is an end-all, be-all. A boot camp plus, a few years of experience, still not going to give you everything that you'd get from getting a degree. So we wanted to provide a pathway into getting a degree. And I think a lot of the people who started with us would have loved to have said, let me just take 4 years and go get my degree first. But they just didn't have the ability to do that based on their own financial or home situation. So we wanted to at least say, hey, you've gone through these 16 weeks. Now you have a step along a path. So first we started partnering with a community college called Community College of Allegheny County. And they gave us continuing education units. Essentially, all community colleges that we've ever talked to, all of the systems that we've talked to, give you a way to show a portfolio and say, here's credit for prior experience, meaning you don't have to take CS 101 if you've already been writing code for 5 years. So in partnering with them, it allows us to say, okay, you're getting some certificate that gives you credit towards the next step in your career.
They also have already established links into the community and into the high schools in order to show this as an option to people that we weren't otherwise reaching.
And then we said, okay, well, we've partnered with community colleges and we've got continuing education units. Has anybody ever heard that phrase before? I think only if you work in education or have taken some community college classes. I hadn't. So I said, okay, cool, partner at CCAC. What can you do with that? And he's like, well, you could be evaluated for prior education, and hopefully that will count towards some classes for your degree. And when we started talking about how many classes that would count towards, it was kind of like, well, it very much depends on the individual. So we said we wanted something a little bit more formal, and we actually got very lucky because the Pennsylvania state system of higher education came to us and said, do you know, universities are kind of changing. Students don't want to come here anymore because they can get these credentials really early on doing something else, start to make some money, and then as they're earning money, they can come back and get their degree later. We love what you're doing. Can you help us? Your graduates are getting hired. Can you help us set up a system very much like what you guys have so that we can build a stackable credential, and then 5 years from now we do have these candidates coming through our school systems.
So we've had our first experience with Clarion graduates, Clarion associate degree candidates going through our training as part of an associate's degree. We've still got some red in on our test here of whether it's successful or not. They've gone through the program, they've got credits that are going towards their associate's degree, but they're not yet out there establishing a tech career. So it's still too early to tell.
Yeah, so they get 28 credits for going through the program. It's the exact program that we give regardless of which pathway you come in. You pay Clarion University, you take our boot camp, and you have 28 credits towards your associate's degree, which allows you to take just several business classes, and then you'll have your associates. It's about half of the associate's degree. So we're experimenting with that. These students haven't graduated with their associates yet. They have to finish that before they can go on and get their career started. So we'll see. Hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll have more information there.
So what would be really cool is to have people coming through the school system and seeing a pathway through to sustainable careers without necessarily having to go through college. So college is going to work great for some people, but for others, being able to see a path where they can get training so that they can get a job and be employed, and then have a pathway through to continuing their education as they continue their career. So we've started working with high schools as well, so working with junior, senior year students, getting a taste of what coding is and getting a program together which can then move on through the community colleges and universities. And also starting to work with them on programs going all the way through the school system so that code can be, inherent in the curriculum all the way through and build up so then people can, the students can see the career opportunity, they can see the path through, and it not be the foreign thing that it has been in the region where we've been working.
Yeah, so we probably should have mentioned earlier that actually this picture is not a picture of a high school that we work with. This is a picture that I downloaded from the internet. The high schools that we work with are very, very small. I graduated with 30 students. I was one of 30. So that's about the typical class. So really small schools where 75 to 90% of the students get a free lunch. So it's not a wealthy area. There's not a ton of tax dollars going into computer programs for these students. They're going through Common Core education. They're graduating knowing a bit about math, a bit about English, a bit about science, but it's very infrequent. In fact, I don't think we've ever heard of a school teaching any kind of computer programming outside of maybe a little bit of gaming or HTML. So being able to bring computer programming to somebody at that age, regardless of what career path they take, we feel is going to help them to become logical thinkers, problem solvers, and able to live their life a little bit easier.
So the accreditation pathway it's really quite exciting, definitely a work in progress. And we're making sure we're working with partners where we can keep our flexibility on the curriculum so we're not stuck in something that takes a year to be accredited and we can't change and go down the path that universities can get stuck with. We need to maintain the flexibility that we can introduce new technologies as we see their relevance and as our clients need them.
Yeah, so anybody who's ever gone through a comp sci program and has asked the question, why are you teaching me something that's 10 years old? It's because it's extremely expensive to get accredited. And when you get accredited, we've gone through parts of this process. You have to look at not only what classes you're going to teach and how you're going to teach them and what the tests look like, but even things like who's going to be teaching the classes. Like they ask some really specific questions. And as you start to change and grow and try and keep up with the pace of technology, it can be really expensive to do that every single year. So boot camps, ours and others, have the ability to say, actually, everybody's asking for React right now, so let's teach some React. Like, we're going to teach this stuff anyway. Let's just teach it with current up-to-date frameworks.
So we were in the right place at the right time, I guess, in order to get press attention during the run-up to the election and with all the talk about coal and what's happening. Which was great for getting attention, but it also brought a lot of pressure on in how can we actually expand? How can we make this something that is beyond just one community, beyond a handful of people coming through? How can we impact and really change the economic future for an entire region?
So within the period of a year, I went from, oh my gosh, how am I going to help my brother not need to ask for money, to I wake up on I think it was April 22nd. I wake up and there's my little brother's face on CNN, the front page. It was like the coolest thing in the world and the scariest thing in the world at the same time. It's like, that's a little bit of pressure. PBS NewsHour did a write-up like suggesting that we were much bigger and more advanced than we actually were, which when you do an interview, they take all these liberties and they don't really tell you what they're going to post. They just put something out there. We've learned a lot about marketing and PR and that kind of thing, just for the pure fact that we don't want to be forced into doing something that was written down one way, and we don't actually work that way because that's very scary. So anyway, the hypothesis that we could scale, again, this is a huge thing, right? To say, yeah, we helped a town. We actually made some small impact for several people or a couple of dozen people, but can we scale it and actually diversify the economy of an entire region? Can we solve those bigger problems that we started talking about earlier?
So a year or so ago, we had Senator Manchin from West Virginia, or his office, invite us down to a job fair. I think they'd heard in the CNN article, it's like, hey, we've got problems down here, come across the border and see what you can do with us. So we went to the job fair expecting, I don't know, little
job fair, like 50
expectations.
people, right?
Yeah, we're used to a small town. You have an event, there's tens of people turn up. We go there and there's 3,000 out-of-work coal miners all wanting a job.
All standing in one room, looking at you like, how can you help? And they're all like very critical, and they think very deeply about people trying to take advantage of them. And so it's like all these questions that we never thought we'd hear. Are you a pyramid scheme? Like, wait, what? I just wanted to help my brother. I'm not a pyramid scheme. We'd be making more money if we were, but if you can help us develop that, that'd be great. But for Senator Manchin to take interest in what we were doing, to say, I mean, he literally had his chief of staff pick up the phone and dial our number. When we took the call, it felt a little shocking. And then when we show up and 3,000 people are looking at us, it was absolutely terrifying.
So to impact an entire region, it obviously takes more than just a couple of people. And we've had a lot of really interesting conversations, partnerships over this year in West Virginia around how we can really impact the communities and make a difference. It's interesting, we work a lot with the National Guard, with the Adjutant General, General Hoyer, because his interest came through because not only are these communities suffering from all of the loss of jobs in the coal mines, there was also the devastating floods last year, and he's a huge part of helping those communities get reestablished.
Do you remember the picture of a house on fire floating down a river? That was the 100-year flood that happened last year in West Virginia. It's now a meme. Somebody's house on fire floating down the river should never be a meme. But at least at this point, enough people are aware of the disaster that there's a lot of government money and attention trying to help these folks.
So part of that, we've established an office in Clendenin where the burning house was going down the flooded river. And so that was with support through from the National Guard. And also the Mountaineer Challenge Academy is a quasi-military boot camp for at-risk youth, actually up in the northeast of West Virginia. So students who have either dropped out of high school or are at risk of dropping out of high school have this opportunity to go along for a 22-week boot camp. And a huge percentage of them end up leaving with a high school diploma. And we've got to go in and work with these cadets as they're going through on seeing what a career in code could be like. And so it's I guess coming through from just being invited down into the area, get to meet with the National Guard, work with them, and then get into the education system. It's really the chance and the thought of looking at all angles, retraining displaced workers, and also looking at youth coming through the system and what are the opportunities for them to stay in the region.
We work very closely with politicians, as we mentioned a couple of times. We're working with Senator Manchin and Senator Capito, the Republican and the Democrat. If you ever find an article about us posted anywhere, if you read the comment section, it'll say, the liberals are at it again. This is because of the liberals. Or, those Republicans, they're here, they're doing this, they're doing that. It's always political, and nobody really knows which side is causing the disaster of coal and tech and this collision of trying to problem solve. And to be honest, it's both. It's been the greatest thing to say. We read in the news all the time about all the negativity of the parties and all the craziness that happens there. But in this state, at least in this state, we've got both senators working together to make actual change happen. And we have competition in the area, which is fantastic. There's Core10, which is a fintech company. There's Richwood Scientific, which is now doing a JavaScript boot camp. And then the community college system there, they're all very involved. They're all very active in trying to help change the economy. So at this point, we're kind of just a cog. There's this huge machine that we are one tiny little part of that we help to spawn.
So not only does it take a village in order to create a change, it also can take a village to give the opportunities for people to come together and to live and learn and work all in one place. Part of this is, in many of these rural areas, people at home have terrible times with broadband, with internet connection. So having a hub in the community where people can come together is really important for driving the economy forward.
Yep, and as you start to think about, okay, cool, no broadband, at least they have their cell phones because everybody has a cell phone. There's no cell service either. So there's no cell service and there's no fast internet. So you can literally live in parts of West Virginia that you have no access to internet. So we build these coding villages. This is our main goal now is to set up these coding villages where people can go, learn how to write software, work from home. We are setting up space. Actually, one of our offices is in an old elementary school's basement, and the classrooms on the second and third floor have been renovated into apartments. So it's really cool. You can come and move in and then take the class and then work from there and be essentially coding 24/7.
So I think West Virginia coming together is an example of what can happen. It's still obviously really early days in terms of impacting the economy in any big way, but there's things in motion that have become more than us, which is great. That was really our goal. How can things move forward without us having to drive it all?
So Bloomberg is defied, or we're starting there, right? He really did have good intentions when he said it, and I think he's retracted it a number of times in a number of ways. And in fact, he's given, I think, $3 million to organizations who are doing just this. He's focusing more in Kentucky and some of the other regions, but his philanthropic arm has actually reached out and said, no, I know you wrote that down. It's not actually what I meant. It's not actually what I said. Take $3 million and leave me alone.
So we had a system that was broken. We had lots of people without work. We had lots of opportunities out there that weren't, going to those people. And we got that into a place where we're starting to get a system which is meaning people can have new career opportunities and is bringing work into the area.
We're still very early days.
There's an awful lot to do. There's a lot of cleaning up of the process and making it better.
And we by no means think that we are, the best people to do this. we happened to be there at that time and wanted to help make a difference. Very small scale. We are still operating as, our company is 35 people. Our impact, our partners' impact, it's getting there. We are making change, but really, we could very much use your help.
So this is where we ask you to get involved.
So one of the ways that you can get involved that's actually fairly, I think, easy for most companies is as you have a project that you may be thinking, hey, I don't really have the capacity to get this work done. I'd love to get it done. I may offshore it. I may partner with somebody to do it. Think about partnering with Mind Minds or one of the competitors in the region. If you get a proposal, if you put out RFPs and you get responses from companies that they hire these bootcamp grads or they're working with out-of-work coal miners, maybe give it that extra 5 seconds of attention to say, hey, actually, I could do something good and get my work done. And hey, save a ton of money because it's fairly inexpensive because the cost of living is so low. These developers aren't demanding $200,000 a year. They're demanding very much less than that. So there are lots of ways that you can work with project teams there.
And there's a lot of text on here, but there's different solutions depending on what you need, whether it's just taking on apprentices, taking on people who have just graduated because you want to have some more support in your team, all the way through to having experienced developers doing complex work for you.
Oh yes, we probably should have mentioned our stage approach model. We start with the boot camp, 16 weeks, and then the next 16 weeks of the graduate's education is on site with us as an apprentice doing client work. So. And that's the vast majority of people as they come through. You do the 16 weeks, and then you do another 16 weeks of just client work. But it's also learning, and the structure's there to help you get better. And then the next stage is for up to 2 years of learning as a apprentice consultant with us or with one of our partners. So hiring bootcamp grads, obviously a good idea if you have the structure in place to support it. If you don't have a structure to support an extremely junior dev, meaning that you have pairing in place, you're going to be able to have somebody have one-on-one contact with this person, don't hire them as your only dev. You'll almost always regret it. But if you have a structure in place, do bring on a bootcamp grad.
And you can bring them on as an apprentice or host an apprenticeship for people coming through, whether part of a bigger program or as part of your own internal program. So a way of really bringing in the different thoughts into your group and being able to really foster someone's career.
Also, you can sponsor scholarships. So at this point, we operate a lot on grant money and donations. We're a 501c3, so people will often our clients will say, hey, actually, I love the work that you've done for me. Let me sponsor the next person who's coming through. And we have mechanisms in place if you're interested in doing that. Definitely let us know.
And then if you're so inclined, feel free, please, to reach out and mentor someone who's new coming through, whether it's on a particular technology, whether it's on agile methodologies, whether it's on soft business skills. There's all sorts of things that people who are coming through, transitioning careers or starting new careers, need help and support from. And it's great to, you get a lot back yourself as well as what you give to everyone else.
So that's us. I think we have another 10 minutes if you have some questions for us. Hang on, I'll be a runner.
I was just going to ask the age as far as maybe like your oldest student that has transitioned to doing development work.
Sure. So we've had a full range coming through from 16 all the way through into their 60s. So we've had a few people in their 60s who have gone through the training and have gone on and worked with us and in some cases moved on and worked with other people. So we've had a full range throughout.
If you could aggregate your questions on one side of the room or the other.
Yeah, we're going to go backwards and forwards. It does you good, It's very inspiring. Thank you for doing this and also and for presenting today. Quick question: how many people fail the laundry test? What sort of percentage? Because Michael Bloomberg might be wrong, but I'm sure not everybody is going to be an amazing coder. or amazing software dev?
You're absolutely right. We try to, or we have a process where we allow people to really self-select out, so they can come along for a couple of weeks. They either get turned off by, yeah, I don't want to break down a problem, and there's people who'll come along, hear what it's about, and go, yeah, that's not for me. But there's some people who go, okay, I'm still intrigued. I can do laundry, so sure. And they give it a go for a while and see whether it is something that feels good or not.
Yeah, we try not to kick people out because there have been 2 people that I'm thinking about who we would have selected out immediately. Like one guy, he came to the informational session. We're like, hope he doesn't show back up because there's no way he can do it. He's now one of our best coders. He's amazing. And then there was a woman who she didn't do very good in class at all. And it felt like, are you just not putting the work in? Are you just not the type of person to do this? And we asked ourselves these questions over and over, but we just kept letting her get to the next phase. And then all of a sudden, something just clicked. And she is now a phenomenal developer. And she's had, several pay increases, and she just does amazing work. So I think you're right, not everybody is, but I also feel like things click for people at different rates and at different times. So we don't want to push anybody out the door and say, you're never going to get this, because eventually they may if they give it enough.
And one of the things we do is graduates who have gone through, if they stay on with us, we ask them to be teaching assistants for new classes. Because not only you don't really understand something until you can teach it, going back through it, people always learn an awful lot. But they also have a different voice for explaining things. They've just gone through it. They can present ideas and recommend different exercises, things to read than either myself or Amanda ever would have done.
Yeah, so I've been doing it for 20-something years. John's been doing it for, a few years, not quite as long as I have. But the people who teach who have just graduated, nope, I got it when I did this. And then for some reason, either I don't remember what made it click for me, or they're able to articulate it in a way that just makes sense for where they are in the process. Any other questions?
Cool. Well, thank you for coming along, everyone. Thanks.